AI revolution is very, very dramatic because the pace at which things are changing in this revolution, there is no historic precedent to compare against, both in terms of the total investment that's happening and hence the AI factories that are being built, and also in terms of how it is actually affecting every single individual because it's attacking at the cognition level, which means anybody who has to think a lot now has to figure out, is it necessary for them to think to that level? They should be able to orchestrate, plan, and more to figure out what they need rather than how it should be done.
If I were to break it down into simpler terms, intelligence is almost a byproduct of having to adapt to new consequences, but then it's also the act of, those new consequences will again lead to further more new consequences, and it's this constant ability to adapt irrespective of how many parameters change. The system must continue to evolve and adapt to sort of build new things from it. Thank you. Can everyone hear us? Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Hi Sanjay, how are you doing?
Well, I don't know if I'm in a simulated world or real world with deep fakes. It feels like you're so cynical. Should you believe in all false things or don't believe in anything at all? So that's a quandary, but it's a fantastic afternoon. Feels lovely to be here.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us, everyone that's in the room. Thank you for spending your Saturday afternoon with us. First of all, I want to thank G5A, the Mozilla Foundation, Berggruen Institute, for putting this wonderful program together. It's a 3-day assembly. I think yesterday was greatly successful for those of you who were here. Today's got some fantastic things lined up as well, and then it continues on to tomorrow. We have a lot to break down, but I think before we get into the technology and the AI and all of that stuff, I want to acknowledge that we're currently in a space that really showcases contrast in a very interesting way, and different forms of thinking, different forms of understanding the world that we live in and we grapple with, and the contrast of you and me as well. We both come from very different spaces. I know there's some overlap in parts, but I come from the world of arts and culture and media, and trying to interpret some of the complexities of the technology world into how it sort of affects humanities, and a lot of what we do through our festivals and my own personal work is try and break that down in a more let's say immersive or interactive manner. And your relationship with technology is quite deep and very vast. So maybe I'd love for you to tell us a bit about yourself and give us some context. You are a man of many talents, and I believe you're also a first-generation graduate, and you have... Yeah, and you've also worked in the world of tech in many different capacities, leading very high-level operations, building companies, building relationships between the tech sector in India and globally. So I'd love for you to tell us about your journey a little bit, and then we can dive into it a bit more.
Thank you, Tejas. My beginnings were very humble. For us, education was not a privilege; it was an expectation. The other way around, it was not an expectation; it was really a privilege. So, my parents instilled the value where education is the surest way of advancement, and I'm very thankful for that. So, landed up. Yes, I was a first-generation high school graduate, and they really encouraged me to pursue education, and primarily STEM. STEM interested me. I got a bachelor's in electronics engineering and went on to do a master's in semiconductor physics. So STEM has played a very major influence in shaping both my professional and personal journey. And because I value STEM, I've championed and created a couple of platforms where the next generation students can actually get inspired, pursue STEM, and express themselves. And if we can create one researcher who can impact millions, then the whole purpose is served. So STEM is a very big part of my journey, and we will speak more about that.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I think while the subject is 100 years of AI, there's a lot that has been said already about AI, and I think we continue to unravel the mysteries around it. And some of it is very polarizing, some of it is hard to understand. So what I'm going to try and do is take your perspective and understanding, and hopefully make it a bit more accessible for those of us who don't come from deep tech. I want to talk about the origins of where technology comes from a bit, and I think all technology since the beginning of civilization has first been human, right? And it is humans trying to understand the technology of nature and then being able to build versions of it to leverage for their own needs and requirements and grappling with their own existence. So it would be super interesting to hear from you, looking at the current state of AI and where we are within the context of technology at large. How do you think that correlates to humanity as a whole? I know it's a big question, but yeah, it'd be lovely to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, if you have to understand AI and technology and how humans adapt, if you take a little bit of a back step and then look at history, um, Homo sapiens, I think, emerged in Africa almost 300,000 years ago. And it was under dramatic and very hardship in terms of climatic conditions. We didn't have claws, we were not the strongest, we didn't have enough power, we didn't have tools, but we survived. That's only because humans have the rare ability to adapt. And that's because of the brains, of course. And I think humans' average brain is like 1,300 cubic centimeters. So we survived because of that change. Fast forward a little bit, humans started using fire as a tool to protect, to give warmth, to give light, and eventually use fire for cooking so that they can extract enough calories and energy from the food. They were still not producing food, they were still gathering food. Almost 164,000 years ago is when they started using special tools, composite tools, stone tools, and I think 90,000 years ago, they started using harpoons, specialized tools for fishing, collecting shellfish, etc. So if you look at the whole history, humans have been very inventive, very adaptive, and they were able to make the best of what was available to them. But until 12,000 years ago, farming didn't exist. That is when humans really saw a dramatic change to their environment. They were all hunter-gatherers, and suddenly they started figuring out how to produce both in terms of agriculture and also how to breed animals. So they started domesticating animals. They started living in, they were nomads. Now suddenly they're having more sedentary lifestyles. And fast forward to Bronze Age, like 5,000 years ago, the humans were subjected to the most evolutionary shock. And it was not just a biological shock, it was both biological as well as in some ways cognitive, because before that was prehistoric period where there was no written history. 5,000 years ago is when humans started writing about it, hieroglyphics, which means there was a concept of external memory. Otherwise, memory was only passed on through experiences, through discussions, etc. So if you look at the entire history, there was a huge shock during Bronze Age 5,000 years ago, both biological and to some extent cognitive. What you're seeing right now with AI is almost an exocortex, where I call that an external brain. We've already outsourced memory to smartphones, directions to Google Maps, etc. But what AI is forcing us to do is to pretty much outsource your entire cognition and thinking, and that is very profound. And what humans will see, I guess I call this as the AI shock, biological shock 5,000 years ago. I think you're going to see a cognitive shock to the human evolution. Pretty much, civilization in Bronze Age itself was a trigger and a reason for humans to evolve. And what is going to happen with AI and how humans are going to receive is something to be seen, but there is an AI shock.
Very interesting. I want to maybe zoom into a more closer time period to where we are in the present at the moment, and draw parallels to similar shocks that we might have seen. Because every time humanity has developed a technology that has been vastly transformative, like farming, for example, it has also been not just a change in civilization, but a change in mindset as a species, and sort of viewing the world differently, understanding new possibilities. We've also done some harm along the way in developing these technologies, obviously, but I want to draw it parallel to moments like, let's say, the printing press or the internet, or recorded media, video, camera, phones. Within the context of these more recent within the human existence, where would you position AI? Like, is it, if we really zoom out, is it really all that we make it to seem? How would you position it within other shocks that the civilization has had?
In my view, it's a pretty dramatic event in human history, I would think. There have been many revolutions, like you pointed out. You had the Industrial Revolution, you had the Internet Revolution. We're not talking about the AI revolution. So in terms of, if you just take electricity, I think late 1800s is when the electric motor was invented. But it took several decades before your factories were powered through electricity. Even though electric motor was invented, it was still running out of steam engine, steam based power generation. Why is that? It needed the rest of the ecosystem to catch up. You needed power grids, power generation, skills. You need to reorganize, rechange your factories, etc. It took time. You fast forward, you have your internet revolution, and that changed the entire way we communicate and connect. And we're talking about AI today, but AI revolution is very dramatic because the pace at which things are changing in this revolution, there is no historic precedent to compare against, both in terms of the total investment that's happening and hence the AI factories that are being built, and also in terms of how it is actually affecting every single individual, because it's attacking at the cognition level, which means anybody who has to think a lot now has to figure out, is it necessary for them to think to that level? They should be able to orchestrate, plan, and more to figure out what they need rather than how it should be done. So from that standpoint, even though there have been many revolutions, I can't draw parallels to how AI revolution compares even in the recent modern history itself.
Absolutely. And while we are talking about technology, I think another important reflection from that is the idea of intelligence. Because I think all of these technologies required the act of intelligence and the ability to sort of action that in developing tools, developing mediums or material of different kinds to create these revolutions. I want to understand from you, how does one define intelligence? Because it can mean so many things, and I think we all have had our own experiences with it, but how does one define intelligence?
Very interesting and intelligent question. People generally define intelligence as something if there is a system which can do many tasks, and if it can do well, it's intelligent. But I think that's very limiting. Um, Calculators can do math better than humans. A chess engine can beat a grandmaster, right? But I don't call them to be intelligent. Um, if you take a kid and show maybe 3 or 4 examples of a dog and say, keep repeating the word dog, I think the kid will be able to recognize a dog, whether it's a fluffy dog, weird dog, small dog, big dog, cartoon dog, robotic dog, because they're able to generalize and um, learn on the fly. So, intelligence is something where you should be able to adapt and learn with very little that may be available. So, you can have systems which can do everything very well, but need not be intelligent. But I think that's where the key difference is. The human brain consumes just 20 watts of power, right? If you take the current AI systems, just one GPU can take 1,000 watts. So there is so much room for improvement in technology per se. A squirrel can figure out complex physics in a matter of millisecond to know whether it will be able to jump from one branch to another. That's an intelligent system. So what we have today is far from it, and that is where I think everyone is aspiring to go.
Fascinating stuff. I really want to talk more about how that comes to life within the context of AI, but I also want to draw from what you just said, which is, I feel like if I were to break it down into simpler terms, intelligence is almost a byproduct of having to adapt to new consequences, but then it's also the act of, those new consequences will again lead to furthermore new consequences. And it's this constant ability to adapt, irrespective of how many parameters change. One must, or the system must continue to evolve and adapt to sort of build new things from it.
Absolutely agree. Yes.
And within the context of AI, obviously, I just want to maybe take it to the room for a second. How many of you actively use AI in whichever way, shape, or form?
The other way around, who's not using AI?
Yeah, that's interesting too. Who's not using AI at all? Like actively not using AI? Anyone? No. Okay, interesting. Oh, okay, cool. There's one. Okay, fascinating.
I want to meet that person later on.
I think there's, for those of us who are maybe a bit more tuned into the evolution cycle of this AI revolution, there's almost this apex, this mystical place that everyone's waiting for, right? Like with automobiles, it was probably the most powerful engine, the most efficient engine, or in transport. And in all of these things, there's always the pinnacle of what one imagines that technology is capable of. Would it be safe to say that AGI, artificial general intelligence, is that pinnacle for the AI revolution? And if so, if you could help break down for the room how you would describe AGI.
Well, that's a holy grail right now. There are so many definitions depending on who you ask, but you said it so well. A system which can really adapt, learn very quickly with very little information, like a human, understand the context, make decisions, take actions, and for every new situation with very little data, it should be able to. And also, AGI in general is considered almost to be able to be an expert in any field that any human can be, at least at like a 85 to 90% level. One human can't be an expert in all the fields, but AGI is expected to do what any human can do at an expert level, almost to that level, and be able to learn something new based on the context. It's almost like a artificial scientist which can come up with hypotheses, do methods, experiments, do the analysis, figure out and change the requirements if you have to, and go into a loop and then come out with a very inventive solution or a proof per se. So it really it really boils down to that, and that's the holy grail. I don't know when, but I think with the kind of research and the money and so many people working on it, it's sooner than later.
Interesting. I'm so tempted to ask what you think the timeline on that is, but we'll save that for
I'll be
another
proven
time.
wrong for sure.
I wanted to roll back to what I mentioned earlier, which is I think intelligence of any kind is sort of a reaction to consequences or adapting situations or environment. Every technology in the past, including the invention of fire or the discovery of fire, let's say, has had many moments, small minuscule moments that have led to that discovery, which then triggers like a whole other set of these new consequences. If one were to trace how we've arrived at AI in the present, how does one reflect on that? Like, what does that journey look like? Why is it the perfect conditions in the 2020s for this moment to have happened, would you say?
Very good question. AI has been there for very long. I think humans imagined something related to AI even during the, I think Greek mythology has Talus, a giant automaton supposed to be guarding the island of Crete. You have a hero of Alexander who came up with new automaton with just water, air pressure, and gears. But all those turned out to be either myth or a mechanical spectacle. I think it is with math, logic, and formal reasoning is when people were able to represent thought with formulae. And that led to the invention of a digital computer in 1940s. And it was Alan Turing in 1950. He was the one who said, "Can machines think?" And I think in 1956, in a Dartmouth conference is when officially, I think the United States started investing into AI. And they all began thinking, I think the famous Turing test is if you can make a machine converse like a human, can a third human distinguish whether it's a machine or a human? That was the test then. So many AI researchers started working on it, and we had like so-called AI winters, exhilaration, acceleration, and then sudden stop, because the AI dream was there, but the underlying hardware was not catching up. Just to give you an example, why it's happening now and not before, coming to the point, in 1997, Deep Blue, a chess engine, beat Garry Kasparov, and the computation power for that was, I think, 11.6 gigaflops. That is like 11.76 billion operations per second. If you take today's NVIDIA Hopper chip, which is a GPU, just one chip alone can do 4 petaflops of FP8, which means it can do 4 quadrillion operations per second. If you take a full system, Blackwell system, it can do like a 70 quadrillion transactions. What we're talking about next year is Vera Rubin. It can do exaflop levels, which is like quintillion. Now, for AI to be able to come to reality, it needed all the necessary computing power. And other than the dream itself, the necessary infrastructure has scaled up in an economical way, which is lending itself to AI becoming a reality today. AI is just not software. There are so many things for AI to work, and we will, I guess, sometime talk about that, but it's just not software.
Absolutely. I want to break down into those layers, but just first on your point with the amount of sheer power it requires for this kind of intelligence, you mentioned something earlier about how little power the human brain consumes, for example, and it has this incredible capacity for intelligence. For a second, just looking at it from a slightly contrarian view, do you think the amount of power it requires to power this technology, do you think it correlates, or are we not there yet? Is there a possibility where that ratio changes over time?
No, I think I don't see human brain consuming more power than 20 watts. If anything, perhaps less. I don't know how humans are going to evolve.
Yeah.
But the frontier technology for AI, again, the holy grail is neuromorphic computing, where they want to mimic how AI systems can work like a human brain. But can these large systems come down to 20 watts? I hope it's in my lifetime, but that is something we'll have to wait and see. But there are companies, there are research organizations already working on neuromorphic computing to try and mimic how a human brain works and bring down the efficiency of the system as low as possible so you can do a lot more with very little power.
Interesting. So I just want to pivot again to a slightly non-technical lens to this. You mentioned NVIDIA earlier. They're obviously if not the foremost, one of the foremost companies within the AI space. And Jensen Huang, the founder and CEO of NVIDIA, describes AI as almost this 5-layered cake or 5-layered stack, for simpler terms. And each layer sort of builds upon innovation brought in by the layer below it. Could you maybe for our audience break that down a bit? Like, what does, for someone who doesn't speak in petaflops and teraflops, what does that mean?
Jensen Huang calls the AI stack as a 5-layer stack, 5-layer cake. I like to call it as almost like an industrial human neurosystem for intelligence. I'll draw parallels. I think the bottommost layer is the power, electricity. You'll see why that's very important. The second layer is the semiconductors. I'm calling whatever power is equivalent to metabolism. You call semiconductors, I'm calling that as neurons. You have a layer on top of that is data centers. I'm drawing parallels to brain and the spinal cord. Then you have your AI models. I will call that as learned intelligence. And then you have your AI applications, and that is where we all use eventually. But to really bring some light into each of these layers, power. Oh my goodness! The power generation is 765 kilovolts from a power generation station, at least in India. It reaches the transistor, which is at 0.7 volts. So 765,000 kilovolts to 0.7 volts. It goes through sub-transformers, transformer substations, more step-down transformers. You have UPS systems. You have AC to DC systems conversion. It has to go through voltage regulation, and eventually it comes to 0.7 for it to be able to work. And just data centers alone today almost occupies 800 gigawatts of power, which is half. I think it's going to be like 160 or 200 gigawatts by 2030. That is 3 times the whole country of France, what consumes today, or it's equivalent to Germany plus UK combined. So that's the amount of power. But guess what? In 2030, that's still 6% of the overall power consumed by the universe. So from that standpoint, it's not like data centers are consuming a lot more power than the rest of the industry. But as a percentage of what it used to be and how it's growing, it's just incredible. Of course, then comes the semiconductors. I don't know if I'll interest you guys or bore you guys, but it's very fascinating. Starts with sand here, silicon dioxide, and You start with that. You purify silicon to make polysilicon, which is then made into an ingot. You slice that into wafers. You polish that so that it's flat, almost atomic level. It should be flat. Then you start putting films. You call it deposition. You apply photoresist. You use UV rays and lithography. Then you etch things out. You dope some charges to make it electrically charged particles, and you clean everything with mechanical processing just for one layer. And you have to do that 100 times. And you build latest GPU has like 200 billion transistors. Imagine 200 billion transistor being made that way. You're building beyond cities, everything in a very small, what you can hold on your palm, right? And you connect all of this, and that's what makes a semiconductor. Third layer is your data center, which is all the servers, which are AI factories. You have your servers, you have your chips, cooling systems, cables, networking. In fact, today's AI data centers even has a nuclear reactor because they cannot tap to the grid without affecting local communities. So large gigawatt data centers has its own power generation units as well. That's your third layer. The fourth layer is what many of us know, which is the AI models. It has gone through a lot of revolution. It started with machine learning, which is patterns and prediction, like will this customer buy? Is this transaction fraud? Just ML. Then you have deep learning, where neural networks took on text, voice, speech, images, video, and learned, and it became a lot more powerful and useful, where it was used in, let's say, recommendation systems. Then came your LLMs, which was a chat GPT moment, where we use for figuring out how to generate the next word or the next token, but it gives you meaningful output or codes. Then you have generative AI, which is nothing. LLM is a subset of your generative AI. It can do a lot more than text. It can do images, speech, video, etc. Then came AI Copilot, where it could assist the human. Then came AI agents, where it could automatically do certain things, but still human in the control. Then you have agentic systems, where you could have multiple AI agents, but still not with full autonomy. Then came agentic AI, where you could do many things, hopefully automatically and autonomously. So with this kind of compute and everything that's available underneath, we have seen an evolution of all these technologies. And on top of that is the AI application. That is where each and every individual in the world, whether you're an artist, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're an engineer, software, you're a journalist, everyone gets diffused as an AI application layer. So these are the 5 layers that has to work in unison, and it's incredibly challenging to get this to work, and it's growing at such a tremendous pace, which is why the whole world is consumed with what is going to happen with AI.
Wow. I think I'm going to take a beat because that was a lot. But as you were explaining some of this, I also started thinking about how clearly this didn't happen overnight. It was decades and decades, if not more, of so many different significant moments in innovation, technology, material, so on and so forth, that has led to this perfect storm almost. And then it blows my mind that some of us use it to make memes. But I want to bring it back to what this means within the context of humanity and this planet that we live on. Because while so much of this technology is fascinating for those who are building it, like yourselves and many of us who use it, I think there's also a large part of the planet that pretty much has nothing to do with the technology. And I want to understand from your point of view, what does this really mean for society as a whole, humanity, and maybe not just the human species, but just overall? What does it mean for, I guess, this little ball we call planet Earth? Like, what is this moment within the context of history?
Um, the AI shock is true in my view, and what it means is that I think since it is merging with what we do as humans in cognition, every single role in the future where AI can intercept will get reshaped. I think every job there'll be a difference in how you do. Um, I think 50 to 55%, I think BCG did a survey, 50 to 55% of jobs will be reshaped in the next 2 to 3 years. But complete replacement, elimination of a job, it could happen. Lower percentage, takes longer, but it is real, right? So what does it mean? It is going to happen. It is up to us to figure out what you want to do with it. If you go back, humans have always been inventive. They've always adapted. The survival is not the strongest. It is the one who can adapt. So those who can adapt and embrace and use it to their advantage will be relevant and important. Those who don't will have a difficult time. So it is such a moment in and transformative.
Absolutely. I mean, you said that those who don't, but I feel like there's another layer of the onion to peel back over there of those who can't. Because I think it's safe to say that most of us, if not all of us in this room, have the ability to own a smart device, have access to the internet, often uninterrupted access to the internet. The affordability of power or electricity is no big deal. And neither is that $15 subscription to a chat GPT or a Perplexity or any of those models. But then there is the layers of society and the entire planet that doesn't have access to these technologies and will often get left out of this conversation, both from a development standpoint and also from a jobs, work, labor, affordability conversation. So I wanted to really touch upon on what do you think it looks like for the parts of society that cannot tap into this amazing technology that we coexist with?
I think it is a collective effort of the governments, societies, people, companies, researchers to make sure this can reach everyone. And it will happen. Nothing happens overnight. Again, most of the technologies of the past took many, many years before it came to fruition. What we are seeing with AI is much, much faster. Now, it also is a function of when you're creating AI and value, where is it actually accruing? Who is controlling it? Who is governing it? How are we distributing it? If we don't do that, then the gap between the people or the institutions who can control AI to the rest of the users will only increase. And that's not good for planet Earth, humanity, humans, and society in general. So it's very essential for those who control also get regulated so that the distribution and access can be met. And that's a very big job. And that is really where governments, institutions will have to play. AI is no longer just a technology. It'll translate to geopolitics. If you don't control certain values of this cake, layers and cake, then you're at the mercy of others. So countries will need to figure out, and that is where you see a lot of sovereign AI, lot of such activity being talked about, lots of investment being made, and it's essential.
I think if I had to sort of look at it from my perspective, I feel like globally there's several emotions at which people come at AI with, depending on which side of the let's say, capitalist aisle one might be on. On one side, it feels like there are conversations and this extreme pitch of the fact that this is going to lead to abundance. This is going to lead to no longer needing several jobs. And there's also the very utopian or slightly dystopian view of universal basic income. None of us will have to go to work anymore and so on. But then there is the other contrast to it, which is also of fear and displacement. And many of us, including myself, have asked ourselves this question of what does it really mean when I'm no longer needed within the context of society, or what I do and I've dedicated my life to is no longer needed. What is that big picture look like? And if I may just add on to that, I heard this in a conversation, like a podcast conversation by Naval, who's a pretty famous investor in the space. And he talks about how historically all countries that have grown and become first world powers, or have had thriving societies with everyone being able to afford almost everything and having a sense of safety, has come from job creation. And the more jobs we create, it is inevitable that society as a whole can move upwards in the same trajectory. But then we also have this mega push towards AI, which, at least in the short run, let's say, maybe not in the long term, we don't know yet, but in the short run, almost guarantees that a lot of the jobs that we know as jobs today may not survive. So how does that make sense?
I know it sounds counterintuitive. There is going to be displacement, no question, right? But there is also going to be a lot more creation, right? Can the same people transition? There needs to be a lot of upskilling, learning, etc. I think it's important not to be fearful, also not be fatalistic. You have to embrace and see it practically. And everyone need not be an AI expert. You have to figure out how to use AI. Start using it. You have to question what outputs you get. You have to challenge it. You have to verify it. Then you have to figure out what use does this particular application would come to me. You have to personalize it. I think that's very important for every individual to start doing that, right? If you don't, that is when there is an issue. And it's very true. The doomers and the advocates, the doomers would say there is a safety issue if you build a very, very complex and amazing system which is more intelligent than the human, then where do we go? That is one extreme view. The abundance view, like you pointed out, AI can be extremely productive. It can help in life sciences to in many areas, including life sciences, education, society, etc. It can lead to a question of what purpose is humans if it can do everything. So which is why there are different economic models like you alluded to. You have your universal basic income, you have universal basic services. Everything is taken care. Housing, education, medical, etc. Everything is taken care. You have a choice whether you want to work or not. That's the other extreme, right? I think in reality, I place myself somewhere in between. It's never going to be a utopia or a dystopia. It's always going to be in a transition phase. And it is the responsibility of researchers, investors, governments, everyone to ensure this is well regulated, well guarded, and distributed in the right way, so that ultimately AI is a technology and a tool. It is the humans which will determine what world we want to live, and we have to regulate that.
Yeah, I think just to speak to what you said, I feel like there's also a slight. I have a slightly skewed sort of opinion on that, because I feel like it's also the decisions around AI are, let's say, without being too harsh, controlled by few, but it does impact everybody, right? Everyone pays the price of the water that is being consumed for these AI technologies, but very few of us get to leverage the power that is generated from that. And I think more and more we stand the risk of that divide either growing much bigger, or like you said, the hopeful aspect is that those in power, those that have the ability to shape policy and to shape regulation, can find these ways. And I'm no expert in the subject, so I don't have the answers, but I think it is going to become more and more important to have systems in place that doesn't just throw us all off different edges, where people who have power just become extremely powerful and are very happy with the evolution cycle of AI, and those who don't find themselves on the extreme other end, paying the price for the development the other side enjoys. I have so many questions.
I just had one comment. You made a comment about water. I recently read, it's very interesting, 500 to 700 billion liters of water is used by golf courses across just the United States. Today, data centers are using maybe 700 to 100 billion liters of water. So, data centers are not consuming as much water as it's made to believe in comparison to the other areas where water is being consumed. But that said, it's more important to see in a small area. I mean, entire United States golf courses spread across everywhere. But a data center takes away from a local community millions and millions of liters of water. So what it does to the local community, because the density of consumption is very high. So that said, the overall consumption of data center water is minuscule today, as of today, when compared to many other things used. But the rest of the points you made, absolutely true. It's a question of where you place yourself in the spectrum, and it's a spectrum, and there will be varied places people put themselves, and there's no right or wrong answer, and we will have to see how these things take shape.
Absolutely. Coming back to sort of this, within the context of 100 years of AI, let's say we've sort of understood how we arrived here to some degree, and let's say we've recapped the complexities of what it means within today. But from your understanding, I'm going to put you on the spot to try and speculate for us. With the understanding of the world, with the understanding of this technology, of the resources it takes to be able to build this and how it impacts society, what do you think comes next? And when I say that, I don't mean that as the next model of ChatGPT and the next design tool that will replace graphic designers, but what does it mean, let's say, within the next decade or 2 decades? And it feels like even that's a stretch. But yeah, I'd love to hear that.
From a technology perspective, there are so many new frontiers. From an AI perspective, I'm talking about, there are many other frontier technologies. From an AI perspective, it's just mind-boggling. I don't know if you've heard about orbital data centers. You put
placing them in space.
Data center in low Earth orbit, and you have unlimited solar energy. You don't have to worry about cooling, water, nothing. You'll radiate heat rather than cooling through air or liquid. It's not economically viable today, but nevertheless, the narrative is there. There are companies, SpaceX, Blue Origin, several more. They already are experimenting with this. So new frontier you see is orbital data center. Another frontier is, it's fascinating. I feel like it's science fiction, but it's actually happening. Asteroid mining. Okay, so if you have a low accessible asteroid close to Earth, 60 to 70% of the volume asteroid has is metals. Metals are very important for the AI industry. You saw the entire stack. So go mine asteroids. You know why? For example, Dominican Republic, Congo. Congo has 70% of cobalt, or more than that, across from anywhere compared to the world. But China has 70% rights for mining. Okay, so what will the rest of the countries do? Okay, let me see if I can go get it from asteroid. China produces 98% of low-grade gallium, which is necessary for semiconductors. It controls 70% of germanium. It goes into power devices, say LEDs, etc. So when you have this, that's where countries will say, okay, let me look at that frontier. Third, supercomputing, other than semiconductors, it goes to, by 2040, you'll have like 2 angstrom ability to draw, transistor, right? So you have to use new technologies, superconducting. Then you have quantum computers. This will be interesting. Your regular traditional computer has a state 1 and 0, but a qubit, a quantum computer can have more than one state. So if you have 100 qubits, you can have 2 to the power of 100 states, which is why your traditional cybersecurity and your RSS security will not work once you have quantum computing, and it has to be replaced. So quantum computing, we're talking about quantum networks. I don't know if you're familiar. You have two areas, superposition and entanglement. You can have two quantum objects entangled, separate them by 10,000 miles, doesn't matter. What state you see here, you instantaneously see there. It's not teleportation, it's not sci-fi, it's not even light transferring the speed of light. No, it's just the fact that two particles can be in entanglement and you move them so far apart, then it becomes a quantum network. You have space factories, you have, I can go on and on. There are so many things, and I think innovation is not going to stop. What is most important is always to figure out how to distribute, how to control, how to regulate without stifling innovation and making sure it does not get stuck with few, and you loss of agency is bad. So you have to figure out. So from that standpoint, there are a lot of new frontiers which can accelerate even more for AI.
Again, that sounds fascinating, and I have so many like super nerdy questions, but I'm going to try and keep it to what you ended with, which is, while this technology is tremendously powerful and we're heading towards, clearly a direction where as long as the money keeps coming into the space through venture capital, it'll only get more and more and more powerful. I want to speak about the context of all of this, let's say within India. Because I feel like there is also a stark contrast within what this kind of technology means, let's say in the West or in further developed nations, as opposed to one like ours, which I think is a bit of an anomaly. And it's a unique one in that it has this combination of extremely large scale, the second largest, if not the largest country in the world by population. We're fast moving towards a hyper consumerist kind of economy. We're also heavily reliant on many other countries for many other things. But at the same time, we have a very, very broad demographic. It's extremely broad. So what does this kind of future look like within the Indian context? And I want to narrow it down to, let's say, things like what you said, the ability to share this power with society at large, ensure that it is done in an equitable manner, and also within our unique sort of market conditions. Because I think all of us who live here in India know that is almost never the case with, any kind of development. So I want to know, is your view that of hope, and that this could be the pivotal moment where things start changing how it sort of trickles down the economy? Or is it at the risk of it sort of widening the gap even more?
I think India is definitely paying attention. I think in 2024, they had the Indian AI mission. They earmarked 10,000 plus crores for this AI mission. AI Kosha, dataset models. It's important to not rely on just the foundation frontier models from the West, because they don't necessarily cater to the Indian context, Indian tastes, Indian situations. and it's important for India to ensure you can bring that, and it should work in vernacular languages. They should. I think they just have 10,000 GPUs allocated for a country like India. That's not enough, but it's a good start. I think it's necessary for owning some portion of this entire stack, because you do not want to rely on uh, outside Indian strategies for critical infrastructure, for national importance, border security, etc. You need to have sufficient control capacity where you can say it is Indian, so that these key areas are at least addressed, even though we are the most populous nation today. So if you have to be self-sufficient for everyone, that's a tall ask. We need to start somewhere, and government has started from what I see, and there's a lot more work to be done. And where there's an opportunity, we will start controlling. We are the most populous nation. We are the most consumers in the world. So in some ways, we are an important party to the West. So we need to use it to our advantage to see how you can leverage that and position yourself. But that said, yeah, in terms of research and owning all of this, we are behind. But I think there are a lot of new things India is doing, whether it is semiconductors or AI, which they recognize it to be very, it's of critical importance. So several actions are taken, and hopefully they will continue to progress.
And I'm going to put you on the spot here. Is there any kind of work that is happening in India at the moment, either private or public sector, that speaks towards this sort of next generation of AI within India that maybe some of us could dive deeper into?
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard about. I think AQV, Amaravati Quantum Village. IBM has put up a quantum computer, and they want to intersect it with they call biofoundry, where you can do data design, enzyme engineering, how you can use quantum compute for real healthcare and biosciences applications. So this is futuristic stuff, and it is happening, for example, in India. There are many such examples. So I think it's happening in patches in certain areas. Maybe I don't have the wisdom, and I don't know how this will all come together, but there are people perhaps working on it, and it will all come together. But if you look at it, even 10 years ago or 15 years ago, we couldn't have talked anything about this. So from that standpoint, India has made strides, and you have to start somewhere, and we made good strides.
Cool. So I have a question that I want to ask you next as we turn the corner and start wrapping up. But before that, I want to maybe do a quick poll in the audience on who do we have in the room. So I'm going to name a few different things, and if you could put your hand up if you relate to that group, so that we can tailor the answers, hopefully, for the last segment.
Questions to Tejas.
Yeah. How many of you would say you're a working professional? Yeah. Okay. Cool. How many of you would say that you're a student? Yeah. Okay. Okay. And how about an artist of any kind? Doesn't need to be a professional artist, but yeah. Okay. Okay. Cool. And within your own capacities, would you call yourself a researcher, someone that is curious and is actively trying to learn in a deeper sense? Fantastic. Okay, nice. Now that we kind of have that, have I missed anyone? Did anyone not get a chance to raise their hand at all? I'd love to know if there is such a group. Anyone? Okay, cool. Great. Nice one. So with that understanding, I want to ask you, for those of us who are in the room, you've seen this sort of curve over, let's say, the last 3, if not 4 decades of how compute, technology, policy, social impact has been shaped as technology moves. If you had to give this room a couple of pointers on what they should keep their eyes and ears open for as we navigate this sort of new reality, almost translating your very sound technological knowledge into real world situations, what does one keep in mind while engaging with AI or choosing not to engage with AI, or is trying to maybe find ways to, let's say, uplift those who don't have access to AI, or are just grappling if it even makes a difference to do any of this? Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I said it before. I think it's not going to help to be fearful. It's not something it has to be. It's not fatalistic. You have to be practical. You have to embrace it. You have to question it. You have to use it. You have to figure out what is right for you. You have to figure out what is not right for you equally. You have to upskill yourself, and you have to use it to your advantage, because what AI can do is make any person extremely productive. So you tend to become more of an orchestrator, creator. You have to use your judgment. AI will not be able to do those things, no matter, not in our lifetime. It's important to retain that. And most importantly, humans, we care, we have empathy, we have an artistic mind, we have judgment, we have sympathy. I think we need to make sure we don't lose any of those things. So AI is complex, but it's still a tool and technology. AI can change the world, but we are the ones who will give meaning to it.
Thank you all. Thank you all for your time. Thank you, Sanjay, for a fantastic conversation.
They just loved it, loved the conversation, and thank you to you too.
Absolutely.
And thanks to G5A. Really appreciate this opportunity. It is, as I said, I don't know if this is a simulation or a physical world. It's just beautiful. It's amazing. A great crowd. I enjoyed as much as I hope you guys did too. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you all. Please enjoy the rest of the program. You can find all the details about the assembly right outside. If not, find someone with the G5A badge. They'll be happy to help you. Thank you all again. Thank you.